Oh, yay, Wendy's there.
Aha, okay, here comes trouble. So one of the questions I have, I'm on my big computer that has like a straight on camera. If I want, if for whatever reason we need to run a live robot in here, should I just join the Zoom from like my Surface and then use that to demo?
We've got a pretty good view of your floor. If you moved your chair, I think we could see it pretty well.
That works. Okay, we can do that. We can do that because that's what I've got some videos in the presentation. So okay, okay, that worked. Whee!
You can just do that for an hour.
That'll work. Okay. All right. Sound check. Wendy, can you hear us? Hello. She's not showing as muted.
I can send her a text here. Because I think she's on her cell phone with the kids.
Ah. Oh, there we go.
All right, I can hear. And so I'm on my phone.
All
Okay.
right.
So if you want, there's a chat if you ever want to ask questions.
Maybe.
Okay. And is Casey with you?
No.
Okay. You'll
Not
see why.
happy about that either.
You'll see why.
But that's okay.
Okay.
And I
Okay.
better.
And I've got Pekin.
Are you gonna? Is there other folks? There are other folks here.
Yeah.
But we're on.
So it's me and Alexa. We're gonna sort of share here. Oh yeah. And from what I can see, we've got Nicole in Bethel and Mr. John Deal in Palmer. Okay. So basically what this presentation is, I don't know, it came out of one of the previous, whatever these are called, webinars. And we got on the topic of gyros and we said, okay, let's do, we'll do a brain dump of everything that we know. So this assumes a team that's basically has heard of the gyro but doesn't know what it is afraid of it, has heard the horror stories, and doesn't want to use it. So we will hopefully convince you to use it, and I've included in this presentation what I did to convince Casey in Moose Pass to use it. So all right. So this and the presentation I've got posted on Google, so if you need to look at that later, you can. This is just my regular slide, so you can get a hold of either me or Alexa. So Alexa and I used to be on the Brickmasters, and that's completely retired now. There was a 2.0 version for a while. My kids are now on the J-Bots, just a bunch of techies. They are an FTC team in their 3rd season, okay. And then I always mention that I have a nonprofit that can be used if you ever have someone who wants to make a donation and they need a nonprofit to go to. JEDC through Becca is also a nonprofit, so you can use that or you can come to me. So Wendy last year when she traveled with her team, a whole bunch of donations and all the checks were written to AOF Robotics. I deposited them. I eventually got my math correct and added up all her checks and wrote her a check back. And that way the people donating get a tax deductible donation, and the robotics teams obviously benefit from that donation. So if you ever need to use that, just let me know. I think maybe Nicole also used that when they went to Legoland. I can't remember. Okay, this is my standard slide. I always include it in my coach training. If ever you wonder why it is that you do this, this is why. It's not about the robot. All right. And if there's nothing else, we'll jump in. So gyro sensor, friend or foe? I asked a few FLL ex-FLL kiddos over the last few days, and the resounding response was friend, but it is not as friendly as a light sensor that you just stick on and off you go. You know, the light sensor, you need to know how high to put it up the table and then you're good to go. This guy's got a little bit more of a personality that we need to deal with, and so we will show you what to do with this sensor here over the next few slides. Basic information is that, what does the gyro do? The gyro sensor basically measures rotation of itself. And what I mean by that is that it is not measuring rotation of degrees on the motors or the wheels. So you can have wheels that rotate 360 degrees, but the gyro will rotate, you know, 100, let's say. So it depends on where your gyro is on your robot, and it's how much it rotates. If you have a gyro that, I put it here, hang on, Alex, I want to say something, jump in. Yeah, just, well, right now, just slideshow. What? Oh, I see. Oh, okay, hang on. There we go. Is that better? There, okay. So if you have, and I put it down here at the bottom, if you have a gyro sensor that is installed with the right side up, meaning that the two little arrows are visible when you look down on it, a clockwise or a turn to the right will generate a positive angle of rotation from the sensor, and going to the left or counterclockwise will generate negative. It is possible to take your gyro and install it.
The top search results.
You know why? Because I said Alexa. You know, let me. Oh, here we go. There. Okay. So, so it is possible to take your gyro and flip it upside down. If you do that, it reverses everything that's on this slide. So everything I'm going to do today assumes that you have a gyro that is installed right side up. Okay? And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. Okay, the blocks you need to know about if you're going to be playing around with the gyro sensors. There's yellow blocks and there's orange blocks. The yellow blocks are what you're seeing right here. It's all the same block, but it just depends on which state you put it in, right? So the first one here is if you choose to measure angle. The second one is if you choose to measure the rate that the angle is changing, which is something we, the Brickmasters, have never used in FLL. The third one is you're given an option to do both angle and the rate of change of angle. And then the fourth one is if you want to reset your gyro to a 0 number. And we'll get into more of these blocks as we go. I just want you to know these are the different states that you can have under the yellow tab for just raw sensor reading. So if you want to know how much the sensor has turned away from its 0 reading. The other blocks you'll be dealing with is the orange blocks. And what those are is your normal flow control, the weight block, the loop block, and the switch block. But you can give each of these a condition to look for something from the gyro. So in the first one, we have a weight block that's looking for less than or equal to 90 degrees. In the second one would be a loop that you would exit the loop whenever the gyro sensor sees less than 90 degrees. And then the third one is a switch where, depending on if the gyro is seeing less than 90 or not less than 90, it'll either go to the top branch or the lower branch. Okay, so those are the different ways that you can communicate with the gyro in FLL programming. Any questions so far? Okay, All right. I'm going to let Alexa talk a little bit about the general, the gist of it is here. If you want to see, there's the robot that's in the picture. This way. Who is sick? Somebody's sick. All right.
So pretty much the main thing with the gyro is it needs to be secure, so it can't move at all. Like, I don't know if you can really see, but our gyro is right there, and it's like, I have no idea how we would get this out, but it's like stuck in there. So it's not going to go anywhere. And so it fits like right inside of one of these Lego squares. So I recommend that is a good way to keep it secure. So we actually, didn't we put it this way? We had to change our 0.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah. So it'll work whatever direction you put it in. And also it needs to be in front of your drive wheels. Or in the middle of the robot, because if it kind of like light sensors, if it's behind your drive wheels, it's kind of getting the reading too late.
Yeah, so as long as it's horizontal, it can be, you know, right side up or right side or completely upside down. That'll just change your positive and negatives. If you want to play with a vertical gyro, and I put this at the end of the presentation, in the off season you could build Gyro Boy and have some fun with that. But if you we'll talk about drift here in a minute, but the reason you want it to be so secure, right? That every time you reset that line, that 0 line, if for whatever reason that gyro is shaking, it can cause drift, even in the middle of a program, in the middle of an FLL 2.5-minute session. It's happened to us. So that's why it's really important that it's secure. Okay, so the picture here is the top view of the robot that Alexa is showing you, and I'm showing you how our gyro is installed on this robot. But when you look at it from the top, you can't really see this gyro because it's buried inside, underneath the frame, between these 2 servo motors, and I don't know how we're going to get that thing out at some point, but it is very, very firmly anchored in there. Okay? Questions on that? Okay. Okay, if you have a robot with you right now, and if you, with a gyro on it, I would like you to try something, okay? We're going to force your gyro to drift so that you can see what a drifting gyro looks like. We're going to do the same thing here, and then I will attempt to show you what it looks like in the software. But what you want to do is one of 2 things. If your robot is powered down right now, power it, hold it, and while you're pushing the power button, shake your robot around, like move it up, down, whatever, and power it up. If you're already powered up, you can accomplish the same thing by disconnecting the cable. That's what we're going to do, disconnecting the cable, and I'm going to reconnect it while the robot is moving. And do it even once it's connected, keep doing it a little bit as it's trying to recalibrate. Okay, let's see if this works now. I'm going to do this. Now, can you guys see my Mindstorms window I just put up?
No.
You cannot. Okay, so we have to get out of presentation mode, I think. And now let's try it again. How about now?
I'm not sure.
Just shake it while so we shaked it while it was turning on.
Oh. Yeah, we shook it. Okay.
So can you guys see, I've got a program up there right now in Lego Mindstorms.
No, I don't see it at all.
You don't.
Oh, I see a power.
So
I
let's
see.
go. Let's do new share. Let's try this.
I think.
Try this.
Okay, I see it.
Okay.
I don't see it. We don't see it. Oh, now we see it.
Okay. Oh, you could see it before? Okay.
Yeah,
So if you look, we're connected via Bluetooth. And so if you look in the bottom right corner, if you're in port view, which is the middle one of the tabs. So the top one is called brick information. The second one is port view. And the third one is the connected brick. The middle one, sorry, the second one is called port view. If you look, see, look at that, it stopped, it went too high. So let's, I'm gonna restart it.
It's 4:30. This is when the parents are picking up.
Yeah.
This goes till 5.
All right. So can you see now the gyro's not moving, it's sitting in Alexa's lap, yet it's reading, it's going -500, -600, -700, even though the robot's not moving. Were you guys able to do the same thing with yours? Because what you've done now is you've created a drifting gyro sensor.
Ours is not drifting.
Oh, yeah, ours isn't doing it.
See it right here, though? This is it, the number 2.
Yeah, number.
All right, so
Yeah,
Now-
and once you reconnect, keep moving it a little for 3, 4, 5 seconds after you've reconnected it, because once you connect the cable or power up, it goes through a calibration routine, and it's while it's doing that calibration routine that it will get thrown off if the gyro is moving, because it's trying to find its 0 reading, and if it can't find it, that's why it keeps drifting like
Yeah, because the number's going high up.
There you go. Right? Ours is going in the negative direction, but yours could be going in the positive direction.
okay, so that number still keeps changing. I can't find
Yeah.
the number.
Okay? So
It's going higher.
it's going higher. Yeah. So depending on how your robot was moving when you caused the calibration to happen, it'll either go higher with negative number, well, lower, I guess, or higher with positive numbers. But either way, what you've got there is a drifting gyro sensor. Okay? Not a good thing, because if that happens to you and you don't know that it's drifting and you start your programs, it can never set a reading of 0. And so as soon as you start running your programs, if you're using the gyro to go straight or to turn, you're in big trouble. Alexa can tell you a story at Worlds. Remember when it went right? We were in base, and it would make a right turn from the west wall into the south wall, and we had a drifting gyro, and we didn't know. So we're gonna give you some tricks here on how to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay. So now let me see here if I can get myself. I'm gonna go back from where you do it, because I don't know how to do it. Okay. Okay. Preview the reset, myself. Okay, so we just did this, right? You're seeing a drifting gyro. So if this happens, very, very, very bad. So let's figure out how to make sure that doesn't happen. Okay. So how to prevent a drifting gyro? Number 1, always, 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 always power up the robot on a flat, stable surface. And I'm not talking about putting the cable in and out. I'm talking about powering up properly. Highly recommend the floor, concrete floor. But when you power up, you want to, number 2 there on the list, gently press the power button, right? You don't even want to be shaking the robot when you're pressing down on there. And then while it's powering up, which as you know can be 20 seconds, 30 seconds, you do not want to be moving that robot at all, okay? Again, make sure you've got a robot, a gyro that's well encased in your robot. And then we will talk here in a minute about adding a gyro reset program and a drift check program, detect drift. So how about you power down, power up so we have a good robot? And if everybody else wants to do that, just put yourself on a nice stable surface and power down and power back up. And then confirm once you power back up that your robot is, or that your gyro sensor is not drifting. So you should see just 0. See, this is why I was hoping Casey would be on. Okay. I'm going to assume these are here. Let's do this, and I'll go just make sure. How did you do this? You said new share. And then we went here. And we go share. Okay. Katie, we have to oh, you're not there yet. Okay. All right, we're going to power up here, and we're going to ourselves make sure that we have a proper robot. Is everyone able to get back to a stable gyro that's not drifting? Ours is powering back up, so we're not touching it, not doing anything. And then we're gonna make it. We're gonna demonstrate this program. We'll make it drift again. Okay, there it goes, and there it is. Okay, so let's go look for it. Oh, that's not good. Is it?
Yeah.
If we don't find it, just reset Bluetooth on the brick. Yeah, reset the Bluetooth on that. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through this little really, really cool program. Go here. Okay, do you see the picture of Casey? Oh, can you see him, Wendy?
Oh, yes, we see.
All right. So Casey, what was it? Last year, I think it was, and he was, I went to Moose Pass and I was working with the moose bots, and he said he was refusing to put on a gyro because he didn't know when the gyro was going to be drifting. So I told him, well, of course you can look at port view the way that we just did, but we came up with this idea of writing a program that would automatically check if the robot is drifting or not. And he ended up having some fun with this and really had an impact on the judges. So we're going to have a look at this program. Hang on. Did I put the drifting? I didn't put it in there. Here it is. I'm in the wrong order. Okay. So this is the drift check program that you can use at any time, and we'll run it here in a minute, and I'll show you what it is that it does. So you start the program, and then the first block that you see is the reset on the gyro. And I do that when you start a program. If you don't know this, if you start a program, all sensors, including rotation sensors in the motors, all sensors are reset to 0. But because this program could end up within another program, like a master program, I've made a point of including here the reset block at the very, very beginning, because if you don't do that and you run any gyro program without resetting it first, it may not be giving you the results that you want. So I put it in here just as a reminder. Okay, then we open up 2 variables. So if you haven't worked with variables, this is just a great, great way to teach your kids about using variables in this very simple program. So I open up 2 variables, both numeric. One is called Gyro 1 and the other one is called Gyro 2. And I just set them to 0 to begin with. So then what you do is you use one of those yellow blocks that we talked about at the beginning, the gyro block, and you have it read the angle and you store it into the variable called Gyro 1. Which, by the way, I've got all of these programs in the Mindstorm file, and I can send you the file if you want the actual program you want to play with. Then what we do is we wait 1 second. So then you see an orange block with a time on it that waits 1 second. And then we take a second reading off the same gyro, but this time we take that reading and we store it into the other variable. We stored it into Gyro 2. So now we have 2 variables, Gyro 1 and Gyro 2. One is holding the gyro reading at time 0, and the other one's holding the gyro reading 1 second later. And so then we ask the question, is Gyro 1 equal to Gyro 2? If both readings are equal, what does that tell you? Right? If you get the same gyro reading on a stable robot and they're the same, then that means your gyro is not drifting. If they're not equal, then that tells you you've got a drifting gyro and you need to deal with it before you go to the FLL competition table. So what we do is we come in here, we read Gyro 1, we read Gyro 2, we put it into one of these red blocks that does the comparison of, you can check for, if you use this block, you can check it to do greater than, less than, and so on. In this case, we're going to check for equal, and we check if they're equal. Feed that into a switch, and if the answer to the question, is Gyro 1 equal to Gyro 2, if the answer is yes, then it goes up to the top switch, and if the answer is no, it goes down to the bottom switch. And so the top switch, they are equal, therefore we are not drifting. And so just having some fun with this, we have the robot flash the color green, and then it cheers to say, yay, everything is good. If you do have a drifting robot, we have the buttons on the front of the robot flash red, and then per Casey's design, we have the robot cry. And what that does is without, you know, in a very, very quick, it literally takes 1 second to run this program, you know that you have a drifting gyro or not. And so what you can do with this is to clean this up, you can turn it into a My Block and put it into a master program. And that could be another lesson that we do. So that if you use a master program, and this is one of the first things that it does, when you turn on your master program as you're queuing to go to the FLL table for competition, right away, it's going to be telling you that it's drifting. And you'll have time to power down your robot and power it back up so that when you walk to the table, you've got a proper stable gyro. We could have used this when we were at Worlds. We would have known, we wouldn't have wasted that match because we showed up at the match and we had a drifting gyro, and it just didn't work. You could, of course, if you don't want to deal with My Blocks and you don't want to deal with master program, if that's too advanced, you should have, every team should have a pre-match checklist, you know, that says make sure you have the robot, make sure you have all the attachments, make sure that it's powered up. It could be that you have jigs. It could be that you have, you know, flags or signs or whatever. Everybody should have a pre-matched checklist. You can put on that checklist to run this program before you walk away from your pit to make sure that your gyro is stable. And then if you have a drifting gyro, you'll have time then to power down and power back up. If you're really in trouble and you don't have time to power down and power back up, then you can do the hot plugging, which is to unplug the cable from the brick and put it back in. Tricky because you have to plug it back in and keep the robot stable as you're plugging the cable back in. It's possible to do, but it's a little bit trickier. So you have to be careful with that. Okay. Any questions? And what I'll do is I'll go and download that program so you guys can see what it is that we're doing. So how do I show them? Can you guys see the camera?
Oh. Elaine, we can see the camera, at least I can.
You can. Okay. Yep. Okay. Okay. So did you? And
people can control, for anyone that's listening, if you go to the part on your screen where you see all the different cameras, you can make Elaine's screen larger by clicking the large square icon at the top of that. So now, Alexa, you're just on camera.
Hello. Okay. Ooh, there we go. Now I can see. So this should be a drift check on the robot. Okay. And so I'm hoping on the camera you can see it. So now you have to have a stable robot. And here, here, maybe the floor will work. So we can see the floor. Let's see. It's too far, right? Hang on. I'm just gonna put it here. Okay, I'm going to try not to move it. Let's see if it'll work. Well, if it, I guess we'll find out. You hear that?
Yeah.
That was a happy robot because it was stable and it's not drifting, right? Now, if I run the same thing while it's moving, it cries. I don't know if you heard that. Yeah. Right? So now it flashes red on the robot, right? So what it's doing there is it's telling us that it has a problem or not. Hopefully not. Let me go there and let me go there. Okay. Let me go back. Whoops. Yeah. Okay. Again, you have it in the slide, but I will send you or post, if you want to, the actual ev3.ev3 file if you want to play around with these blocks and download it to your robot. Just make sure that you update. Obviously, the gyro sensor on our Katie robot is important too. So just make sure that if you're going to take this program and download it to your robot to run some tests, that you update your ports. Okay, so that's one thing. I have my slides in the wrong order here, but that's one thing I wanted to say here when I say how to prevent a drifting gyro is to do the drift check program. And then the next thing I want to talk about is the Gyro Reset program that we used in every. Did you guys have it in every move? Or just in the master? I think it was like every, maybe it's just in the master.
It was definitely.
So Builder Dude 35 turned us on to this. And what you see here is our program that we went to Worlds with 2 or 3 years ago. I went digging into the kids' files last night and found this. And I went back and looked at the Builder Dude videos. He has some really, really good videos on the gyro. And this isn't exactly what he has. This is what the kids ended up doing a couple of years ago. But basically what this does is whenever you power up your robot, and again, put this in the front of your master program if you want to, or put it on your checklist, it's an extra step if you want to make really, really sure that your gyro is well calibrated. I don't know if it doesn't hurt, let me put it that way. I don't know if it really, really helps. Down here at the corner on the right is what Builder Dude 35 did, and at the top is what we did. And we just did it because Builder Dude 35 said to do it. I don't know if it helped or not, but it certainly didn't hurt, and it was just an extra step in making sure that the gyro is as calibrated and stable as possible. And that's really the big trick with this thing, is that because it measures movement, everything that I've been talking about since we started this conversation all has to do with movement, and basically making sure that you, as it says on there, you do not move the equipment, in this case the robot, as it's being powered up or connected with a cable, and that as it's calibrating, it is stable. Everything we just talked about all has to do with that. So if you can get into the habit of making sure to have a stable power up, you should have no problems, you know, using it to turn and to go straight. So that's the first part of the presentation, which is all about stabilizing it. And then the next part of the presentation is for us to get moving. This picture on here was a all-girls summer camp that I did, and they all had light sensors and gyro sensors, and they were trying to get their robot to do a chain reaction. It was really interesting. So, okay. Going straight, which I've always said, do you agree? Yeah. Hardest thing to do in FLL. By far the most difficult thing to do. You can go straight reliably, that is more than half the battle, in my opinion. So here is the general idea. When you reset a gyro, it will set an invisible line straight ahead that is a 0 reading. And basically what we want to do is follow that 0 reading. If the robot is pulling towards the right, then what we want to do is correct by telling it to turn left, right? To get back to the 0 line. So to create a left turn, what we're going to do is we're going to generate negative steering, because in the move steering block, negative steering makes you do a left turn. Okay, so a positive gyro sensor reading is going to be converted into a negative steering in order to generate a left turn. And then the exact reverse, if your robot is pulling to the left, then we want to correct with a right turn. We're going to create a right turn by applying positive steering, which means that negative gyro reading is going to be converted into a positive steering. Okay, and basically if we do this over and over, my dogs. If we do this over and over again, then the robot will self-correct and go straight no matter what. That's the general idea of using a proportional straight program using the gyro sensor. So let's dig in. Okay, so this is a very, very simple but extremely effective program to go straight using the gyro. Okay, so again, just because especially this piece of code is something that you could end up converting into a my block, and you end up using this potentially hundreds of times in 2.5 minutes, you have to make sure that you reset your gyro at just the right times. In other words, anytime you want to follow a line, you're going to set that as a 0 line. So every time you do that, you reset your robot, because if you just are going up and down this table, the gyro is just going to keep adding and subtracting degrees of rotation unless you tell it to reset to 0. Okay, so this block is going to be needed, maybe not, depending on what it is that you're doing. The loop I have in there right now, it says infinity, but what you're going to want to do is play around with that loop to generate just the right amount of distance that you want the robot to do, right? There's different ways you can do this. You can do it with, you know, radius of the wheels. You can get really, really, really fancy with this. Right now, I've kept it very, very simple. So what you do is you enter your loop, you take a measurement of your gyro sensor, and in this case, and we'll get into this number here that's in this math block in the middle, we'll dig into that number quite a bit. It's -1 in this slide. So you multiply it by some kind of a multiplier, and that gets converted into the steering portion of your steering block. You do that for some amount of time. Here it's infinite, but obviously on the FLL table, you could do it for a number of seconds, for example. You could do it for a number of rotations on the motor blocks. Different ways you could do it. And then once you've reached whatever distance you're looking for, you could then you then put the brakes on your motors and you stop. Okay. I want to say something and now I've lost it. It'll come back. Oh yeah, the negative sign, right? The negative sign is there because if we set the gyro to a 0, and let's say it moves forward a little bit and it is pulling to the right, the number that's going to come out as the raw reading out of this block is going to be a positive number. So let's suppose that it has drifted 2 degrees away from 0. Well, now what we're doing with this math is we're taking this 2 degrees away from 0, we are multiplying it by -1, so it becomes -2, and then -2 is the amount of steering that you apply to the robot, and that is how we have now converted positive degrees away from 0. In other words, it is drifting to the right, and we've now converted that into a left turn and negative percent of steering to get it back towards 0. Ran some tests yesterday, and we'll talk about it in a minute, but it takes over 1,000 measurements per second. So it's taking lots and lots and lots of measurements as it's going. So this robot's not going to get itself way, way, way off of 0 unless somebody interferes with it. So it'll just be very, very slight adjustments as it goes. So for your robot, and we're going to do this here in a second, and I did some measurements on our robot last night, but basically, number 1, play around with this multiplier, because depending on the size of your wheels, how far they are from the gyro sensor, that number, a number that works on this robot may not work on yours. So you've got to play around with that. And the other thing is you've got to play around with the power also to make sure that the power is the right level for your robot. And like I said, then adjust your loop so that it stops where you want it to stop. You could, for example, have the loop stop whenever a light sensor detects black. You could do that. You could stop when a touch sensor detects a wall or an object. Okay, so there's different ways that you can use this so that your robot has a ton of intelligence built into it to know how far you want it to go straight. Okay. So just reiterating what I just talked about, right? Reset the gyro only when your programmers want to set a 0 line, and then play around with this number. So this is sort of a deeper explanation of what this number does, this multiplier. If you use a multiplier of -1, then for each degree that you're off of 0, that'll be converted into 1% of correction. If you use a multiplier of -10, then each degree off will be translated into 10% of steering. In other words, you're telling this robot to really, really correct. And then you could go into numbers that are below 1, and then if you have, in this case, 0.5%, and then your robot will then have half of the reaction. So 1 degree away from 0 will be 0.5% of steering. Okay? See if this works. You ready? Let me know if you see it. All right, you guys see that? Hear that?
Yep.
Okay, good. I was pretty proud of myself there. I did some video editing and everything. All right, here we go. So that was -2 on this robot. Obviously, that looks good, right? Okay. Hang on. Here we go. This one's fun. Okay, make sense? All right, and then at 0.5% of correction.
Elaine, I don't know, the audio just isn't working for me now. Can other people hear?
I cannot.
Okay.
Okay, I'll tell you. Okay, so I assume you could see, just couldn't hear?
Yeah.
Okay, so -10, right, was way too high. You could see that the robot, and you can get it, you know, the kids will have a blast with this. I remember Jackson playing with this several years ago, and he had the thing going in circles because it was just completely lost. It was just way over correcting. -2 was pretty good, and then -5, which is the video you just saw there, is works, but it's a very, very gentle, very gradual correction. So depending on your situation, it's not necessarily that this is good or that it's bad. It depends on the situation that you're dealing with, right? Typically, you want a relatively quick response back from the robot because you don't want it to drift off its straight line too much. And so you need enough of that multiplier needs to be high enough that it gets itself back online relatively quickly, but not so much that obviously it gets itself into this crazy loop. Okay. So what I'm saying here is the combination of the multiplier and the power level is going to depend on your robot, and you'll have to experiment with it a little bit. And what you'll find as the kids experiment with it is they'll find there's a range that works really well. And you can then, you know, if you have a short distance you're traveling or a long distance you're traveling, if you're going slowly, if you're going quickly, depending on that, you may end up moving that multiplier around a little bit in order to get you just the right correction that as your robot's going straight. And so the other thing that could impact that is the shark. Remember the shark tank from the Animal Allies or Nature's Fury? So we have the shark tank, and for us, the way the kids that designed it, they dragged the shark tank on the left side of the robot. And so it put a huge amount of stress on the left side of the robot. And so obviously, if you just did a green block, that robot, because it's dragging something on the left, wasn't able to go straight. And yes, of course, you can accommodate for that a little bit, but depending on the table that you're on, that wasn't very reliable. Well, if you do this kind of a program and you tell your robot to go straight, even though it's dragging a heavy attachment on the left side of the robot, it doesn't care. It's going to correct for that. And so the robot was able to go perfectly straight with that big shark tank on the left and deliver it to the square every single time. Okay, so this is the advantage of having something like this, is if your robot is not perfectly balanced, which it's not, even if you think it is, and then if you've got attachments that are throwing it off, this kind of programming will correct for those imbalances and keep it going straight. Okay, how are we doing? 10 minutes. Okay. A couple of other things that you can try. If you go to this video, it's a 22-minute video. It's really long and it's really, really good. It's Builder Dude 35 who goes through the entire PID. If you've got any type of engineering background, you'll know what I'm talking about here. What I just showed you is proportional. This one is proportional, integral, derivative. So it takes how much you're away from zero, and it also looks at how far you are from zero and how far you are from zero compared to the last measurement that you took. So there's three things that it looks at as it corrects to get back to the zero line. So proportional, integral, and derivative. And it's quite an involved program. I have it in my file that I'll send to you guys if you want to play around with it. But the video is very, very good. And if you've got a kiddo who is really into this, it's just a great next step. And it makes it so that when you try and throw the robot off course, not only will it correct, but it's going to fight you. Like it's going to push against you as you're trying to throw it off. And on FLL, that doesn't really happen where it's running into, live obstacles. What it is, it's going to be more the imbalance of whatever cargo or attachments that it has, and it makes it even straighter. And then the other thing that some people do, we've never done it, never found that we had any kind of advantage with it, but I would love to see if anybody wants to do this, is in the blue advanced tab, something called an unregulated motor block, which says that if you put 20 power on a motor, it's 20 power, and the brick will put no intelligence into adjusting for the battery or adjusting for any kind of steering or anything. It'll just put 20. And so that's another way, instead of using the steering block, that you can use it, and you can see if that gives you some good again, that program I just gave you is fantastic and will greatly improve your reliability. But if for whatever reason you like this idea of, if you've got a kiddo that wants more, this could be something else that you could do with them. Okay, and then the remainder of the time, we don't have much time, but what I wanted to go over a little bit is now turning. We've talked about going straight, and now we'll talk a little bit about turning. The code at the bottom is not an FLL code that you would use. What it is, it's a little piece of code that tells the robot to turn 180 degrees. And what I've got going in there is a counter to keep track of how many measurements the robot takes in the time that it takes it to measure 180 degrees. So that's the count variable. And I have a timer that I turn on to see how long does it take for it to measure 180 degrees, okay? What I vary is the power level, because as you can see on the right side of my slide, go slow is my message here, okay? When you look at this, you can see that at 100% power on this robot, it took about 1,000 readings. It landed at 203 degrees. So even though I told it to turn 180, it turned 203 degrees, 23 degrees off of what I wanted. And it took it, 0.77 seconds to do that. So then I lowered my power. So now the robot's going a little bit slower. It took fewer readings, still ended up at 203 degrees, and took a little bit less time, which is counterintuitive, but it did. So you keep going down, and you see that your accuracy gets better and better and better. Your ending angle, you get closer to 180 degrees, the lower your power is, okay? And as it does that, of course, it takes more time and it takes more readings in order to get there. Sorry. Okay, so you can see the sweet spot, right? It's sort of in that 10, 20 range when you turn, and you can solve for the inaccuracy. And the reason it does that is because the way that the gyro works, by the time it realizes that it's at 180 degrees, there's a lag between that measurement being taken and the momentum of the robot slowing down. So there's a couple of different ways that we can accommodate for that, and now we'll talk about that. So how to compensate for overturning. So the first thing is just go slow, okay? When they want to go 100%, this is going to hurt them if they want to turn that quickly. Use the greater than or the less than option rather than, the greater than or equal and the less than or equal. So what that means is that as soon as your gyro detects 180 or 181 or 182, whatever the first thing it detects, it's going to stop. If you just say greater than, you've now added by necessity one degree of error right then and there, because when it detects 180, it's not going to stop, it's going to keep going. So make sure you use the greater than or equal and the less than or equal. One option that you could use, and this is what my kids ended up doing, is breaking the turn down into two steps. So they started fast, so they're at 50%, and instead of going all the way to 180, they went until they saw greater than, say, 150, and then, oh, I've got the wrong power on there. I'll have to fix that. So then they lower the power and keep going for the rest of the turn. So if you've got a big turn to do the beginning of the turn fast, because you don't care at that point. But then when you've got about 20, 25, 30 degrees left to go, slow the robot way down and just finish it at about 10% power. I'll fix that slide, okay? And so when I did this, I got to 181, and it took about 1 second to do a 180 degree turn, which is a big turn in FLL. Okay, the other way you can do it, which has sort of less intelligence in it, but works, is if you have the robot and you know you want to turn a certain number of degrees, just tell it to turn fewer degrees. So in this case, I was playing around with this guy yesterday, and to get 180-ish degrees, I was actually telling it to turn 164, and that ended up giving me 183. So that, of course, is going to be dependent on your power. So if this power was to get slowed down, then you could, then the number of degrees you tell it to turn, it's sort of a, not very intuitive, but this is the way that we accommodate for the fact that the robot, that the gyro, it takes time to tell the robot to stop turning. That was it. All I wanted to say here was just sensors in general. If you look on the rubric, sensors are there. They are part of what the judges are looking for. Whether or not you use a gyro and you want to use just color, or you want to use touch or ultrasonic, any of those are going to work to the kids' advantage in judging to be able to increase the reliability of their robot while it's on the table. 5:15, that was pretty good. Pretty good planning. Any questions?
Anybody have questions? And I'll say, especially the newer coaches that are on, Elaine and Alexa are great people to ask any design or programming questions, not just about the gyro.
Yeah, I mean, I will say this. We started being able to get reliably to the other end of the table only once the kids started playing around with the light sensors and with the gyro sensor. Otherwise, getting across 8 feet or 7 feet this year, it's like 100 miles in a car. You can do it once in a while, you'll get lucky. But if you want to do it reliably, you have to take advantage of these sensors and learn how to use them. The program, the proportional program that we have in here, let me go to it. This guy here, you can switch that out to a light sensor and use reflected light intensity, and you're basically following a black line using a light sensor. It's the same program, it's the same idea. So it's converting how far you are from the edge 50% line following and converting the difference into a right turn or a left turn if you want to do if you want to follow the edge of a line. It's proportional line following. It's very simple. And so that would be between those two programs. Let me tell you, your reliability goes up. It puts you in a different category. It really does. So even though this is a lot of information, and maybe you're sitting there going, "Gosh, why would I want to deal with this sensor?" The benefits are just really put your reliability in just a different category. What would you say? You agree?
Yeah, it really saved us. Yeah, a lot of teams didn't use the gyro, and so us using the gyro was very it was different, and it just made our missions more reliable. Like, you have to, if you want to go straight, you need to use the gyro. There's always going to be something that could cause you to drag or to get caught, and the gyro will help correct that. We're using it in FTC now too.
Yeah, that's another reason. I really didn't get into that, but another reason to learn the gyro in FLL is if your kids go up to FTC. We actually started playing with it when we saw the video that Schrodinger's hat posted many years ago when they were still living in Fairbanks, and they had their big FTC robot driving down their living room, and Katie did exactly what I was doing to this robot last night, trying to get it to go off course, and her FTC robot was like, nope, getting back online. It was really impressive. So that's another reason to learn it, is that it's a transferable skill to the next level. program.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm going to cut us off. I think it's time.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much for doing that. And we'll post the recording online and hopefully people will use it. If you go back and look at the views, a lot of those videos have gotten a lot of clicks. So I think it's a great resource for coaches to have.
And then let me know if you want to attach the EV3 file itself so that they have the.
Yes.
Oh, here we go. Do you have a robot with you? Almost. Okay, there we go. Okay, good. All right, good. I can give you the file, and then that way the coaches. I mean, of course, I want the kids to program their own, but the coaches can have a look at it, and then they'll have the exact code that we use to do the testing.
Awesome. All right.
All right.
Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.